What has gone wrong for Canada, and can it be turned around? To understand why Canada and even the whole world has shifted so far to the left, we talk to one of Canada's top politicians on today's Trumpet World. The Old Plain Truth called itself a magazine of understanding. A tagline we used at the Trumpet as we follow in its footsteps is "Understand your world." Canada has been going through a process familiar to so many of us around the world. The left have become far left, the right have become useless, constantly shifting leftwards. I wanted to understand this process, as well as what is going on in Canada more generally as they head towards elections later this year. So to help do this, I sat down with one of Canada's top politicians. Here's the interview. I hope you find it illuminating. I'm very excited to be joined today by Maxime Bernier, founder and leader of the People's Party of Canada. Mr. Bernier, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm very pleased to be with you.
It's a real pleasure, a real honor to have you with us. Now, I think I've seen recently you were described as America's Donald Trump. I think for people in the UK, I've seen you compared to Nigel Farage. I think I've also seen Nigel Farage compared to you going in the other direction. You've been a cabinet minister under Stephen Harper in the Conservative Party. You then left that party. I think most of our Canadian listeners will be very familiar with you. In fact, we did a show on Canada recently, and we had someone write in and complain that we didn't talk about the People's Party enough. So we can rectify that today. But could you start by introducing yourself, giving a bit of background to you and to your party?
Yes, absolutely. So I must say that I'm not a career politician. I worked in the private sector for 19 years before being in politics. I was working in the financial sector, VP of a bank and insurance corporations. I decided to jump into politics in 2006. You said it, with Stephen Harper at that time. Stephen Harper was the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. So I was industry minister, foreign affairs minister, minister for small business and tourism. And when Stephen Harper resigned as the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada in 2016, so we had a leadership contest for the Conservative Party of Canada, 2017, 2018. And I did run to be the leader of the Conservative Party at that time. I didn't win with 49% of the vote. We had a strong platform based on 4 principles: individual freedom, personal responsibility, respect, and fairness. And all our policies were in line with these 4 principles. So after that leadership contest, I tried to work, and I did work with the new leader of the Conservative Party of Canada at that time, Andrew Scheer. And I worked with him for 15 months. But at the end of 2018, as you may know, in Canada, we had a general election in 2019. And I had a private meeting with Andrew Scheer. And I told him, are you taking some of our ideas, that were very popular with the conservative membership for the next electoral platform for the Conservative Party of Canada for the general election? And he was very honest. He told me no. He said, Maxime, your ideas were very popular with the membership of our party, but they are not popular with the general population. So my goal right now is to be elected as Prime Minister, and I won't take any of your ideas. So, and actually, Andrew Scheer and the Conservative Party at that time, and still today, they're only conservative in name. And I decided to resign, and we created the People's Party in 2018 based on the same platform that I was putting forward during the leadership contest. And when they didn't want to fight the climate hysteria, they didn't want to have a discussion about immigration in Canada. They didn't want to balance the budget. So that's why the Conservative Party was not, and is still not, conservative. It's like your Conservative Party in UK right now. So we created the People's Party. We had our first election in 2019, and we had 1.6% of the vote. The second election for us in 2021, we were able to have 5% of the vote, almost triple our score from the first election. And now we will have a general election in Canada this year in 2025. It may be this spring or maybe in October 2025, this October. As you know, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau resigned. There's a leadership contest right now with the Liberal Party of Canada. They will have a new leader the first week of March, and we may have an election this spring. We don't know. But we are, as a political party, a populist party defending Canadian values and family values, and defending also Canadians, putting our country first. We are the only national political party in Canada that is fighting against the UN globalist agenda. We will withdraw from the Migration Compact from the UN. We will withdraw from the Paris Accord. And we are also the only national political party in Canada that is against the war in Ukraine. I must say the proxy war between US and Russia in Ukraine. Our government in Canada did spend about $15 billion in aid for Ukraine. We are against that. We must bring that money back home. And so that's the People's Party. And we are ready for the election here in Canada. And we are, like you said in the beginning, that we are a little bit like the reform of Nigel. Control immigration, smaller government. I was the only national leader against the mandates during COVID hysteria. Our party is for individual freedom of choice. And so I went in jail for that in 2021 because, I was speaking for freedoms and against the vaccines and for freedom of choice with an informed consent. So we are a real populist party, and we have some policies that are in line with President Trump. For example, we are fighting against the censorship in Canada. We are fighting the globalist, but also the woke ideology. We will stop the DEI programs that we have in Canada. So a little bit like Trump on these policies. And I think that the future is it will be good for us as a political party. But we understand that it is more difficult for us and like for Nigel in UK to have candidates elected because we don't have any proportionality in our electoral system. So if I remember, Nigel had about 15% of the vote. He was able to elect, if my memory is good, 6 candidates. Us, if we double our score at the next election, will be around 10%. We may do better, I don't know, but we may have our first candidate elected this year at this general election.
Yeah, it felt like Nigel Farage had years and years of polling at that kind of level before breaking in. I definitely want to talk about the right and kind of what's gone on wrong in Canada and around the world. But just to start with, you mentioned Justin Trudeau, him stepping down. I just wanted to start by asking kind of what has gone wrong with Canada, because so my background here, my wife's Canadian, so I'm kind of interacting with Canada and Canadian news kind of periodically. We visit every few years. We call home regularly, but I just kind of find every time I encounter news from Canada, I am shocked at how bad it is. Like migration, I think 1 million migrants per year, a bit more than that, 2023, which for a country that's got half the population of the UK, maybe about an eighth of the US, is astounding. Like that I don't think there's anywhere in the Western world that has that kind of per capita rate of migration. 15,000 people being killed by the medical assisted and dying program in Canada for 2023, about the fifth leading cause of death if you compare it that way. And you mentioned the COVID actions that is just many of those just dystopian, some of the worst in the Western world. You're going after the finances and the bank accounts of those that donated to a cause that the Trudeau government disagrees with. The online harms bill, C-63, I was writing on that a year or two ago, where you could be put under house arrest for something you might say in the future. Like, it is astonishingly bad. Why is it so bad in Canada? How did it get to this point?
The Trudeau government did destroy our country economically and socially. Just about the immigration, you're right. The growth of our population was 3.2%. If you compare that from 2023 to 2024, 3.2%. And 100% of that growth was coming from immigration, not Canadians having babies. It's coming from immigration. And if you look at the other Western countries, the average of population growth last year, 2023 to 2024, that was 0.6%. So yes, with a country of 40 million people, we had last year more than 1.2 million foreigners in our country. And actually that's causing a big crisis, housing crisis. It's very difficult to buy a house in big cities in our country. And housing is unaffordable also at the same time. You add to that the fact that we don't do any screening with our immigrants anymore. Actually, we are not asking them to speak English or French. We were asking that a couple of years ago. Now with Trudeau, everybody can come to Canada. And for me, it must be a privilege to be a Canadian. And now you add to that the Multiculturalism Act, where we are promoting multiculturalism in our country. So these foreigners are coming to Canada, and the federal government is promoting their culture, is not promoting Canadian history, Canadian culture, Canadian values. So, for example, if you are a new Canadian from Chinese origin, for example, and you want to celebrate the Chinese New Year, you will be able to have funding from the federal government to do that. So I don't have anything against the Chinese New Year, but if you want to do that, it must come from your own pockets. Now, with mass immigration and multiculturalism, they're coming to Canada and they're living in ghettos. We have ghettos in British Columbia, in Surrey, where you think that you are in India. We have other ghettos also in Ontario. We don't want that. We want our immigrants to be able to speak English or French like we were asking 10 years ago. We want them to integrate into our society. So that's why the position of our party on immigration is a moratorium on immigration until we fix all these problems. It is not only an economic problems and economic challenges for Canadians, but also a social one. We are, we are actually, the economy is growing in Canada. Our GDP is growing, but our GDP per capita is going down. So what I'm telling you is, we have the economic pie that is growing, but our slice of the pie is smaller because the population is growing faster than the economic growth. So our standard of living is going down. Our purchasing power is going down. Everybody is poor. You add to that the inflation that is coming from the money creation during the COVID hysteria when Trudeau decided to do a big deficit, about $450 billion in COVID deficit. And the Bank of Canada was printing money out of thin air. And as you know, when you're doing that, you are creating inflation. And now we are paying for that inflation tax. The inflation in Canada is about, 5-6%, the real inflation. But the official one from the government, the way that they calculated that, it's only 2%, but that's not the reality. So if you have a pension from the government, your pension will increase by 2%, when the real inflation for your grocery or at the pump must be 5-6%. So everybody is poor in our country. Add to that mass immigration, and we are not integrating our immigrants. So that's why we need to have, a moratorium ending that mass immigration and starting in Canada mass deportation. And I will explain why. In Canada, you have all these foreign students coming from India, and they try to stay in Canada under a student permits. But when you come here to study, when you have your diploma, you must go back to your country of origin, like it was in the past. But they want to stay here in Canada, and the federal government is doing nothing. So they're illegals. They don't have any permits after that. Same thing for the temporary foreign workers in our country. At the end of the work permit, they are staying in Canada. And now at that time, they're illegals. And we have fake refugees also who cross our borders coming from the US and other countries to Canada. So, and if they're not real refugees, they must go back to their country. So we have between 25,000 to 500,000 illegals in our country right now. So we must deport them. And that's the position of the People's Party. It's the Trudeau government decided to do that mass immigration to please the big businesses. And they didn't want to reinvest to be more productive, but they wanted to have cheap labor. And he did that. So put all that together, plus the censorship coming from Trudeau with all these legislation on social media, the big deficit with this year in Canada in 2025, we will have a deficit of around $60 billion. We don't have that money. So it's the economy is very bad. We may be in a recession soon in Canada. And that's why the Liberal Party of Canada is not popular right now in the poll. And that's why the People's Party may have a good election at this next election. I understand that they will have a new leader, but I don't believe that leader will be able to stay in power, and the Liberal won't be able to stay in power. The disaster that Trudeau did socially, economically, and also crimes, like you said, crimes are up in Canada. And I understand why also President Trump is mad at us, because the last 3 years, the US authority were able to intercept at our borders 500 terror suspects in US coming, and 80% of them were coming from Canada. And last year, they arrested 1 million illegals crossing the border from Canada to the US. So we need to control our borders, and we need to stop that mass immigration. So it's like you said in the beginning of your question, it's not going well in Canada, and it will take more than a year to fix all that.
And I guess that is my next question. So migration, obviously, from what I've seen from you, because I think you've had some articles in the Telegraph and things, that has been the main focus that I think that I've heard, at least. Maybe that's just because that's what kind of crosses over to the UK. Do you see migration? You mentioned migration and Justin Trudeau, like, as the causes of the problems. Do you see migration? Do you focus on that because it's kind of a root cause of so many of these other things? Or is it that it's, say, a more urgent thing that needs to be addressed, but that there are deeper problems that migration is kind of a sticking plaster for? Like I think birth rates in Canada, for example, are way down. Like, is that the main thing, or is there more to address more fundamentally?
Yeah, it's the main, the main thing, but also it's easy to fix. I'm not anti-immigrant. now it's not fair because we have all these people who came here in Canada thinking that they will have a job, and it's very difficult for them to have a job, and they're staying in hotels, paying that the federal government is paying for that. So it's difficult for them. They cannot, they cannot work and help their own families and making money for their own families. So if you care about immigrants, we must stop that mass immigration and opening our borders a little bit later. But yes, immigration is the roots of a lot of problems in our country, like housing, like the fact that our standard of living is going down, like also we have our health care system, is very bad. You have long waiting lists for surgeries. And we have more people, and these immigrants who are coming here, are not young. The one of the reasons why Trudeau did that, he was saying to us, our population is aging. We need to have young immigrants. But the data is the opposite of that. These immigrants who are coming, or foreigners who are coming here, are not so young. They're, on the average of the Canadian populations. And after that, they are able to bring their family, uncle, and all their large family. So that's not helping for the aging of the population. But yes, we have a problem also of, the fact that our natality rate is very, very low, like other Western countries. We need to try to have policies that will encourage parents to have kids. And the best way to do that is to have a small government in Ottawa that would be able to balance the budget, lower taxes for everybody. So when parents will have more of their own money in their own pockets, that may be a good incentive for them to have kids. But immigration is a big one, and the impact of mass immigration in Canada is huge on our standard of living, and that's destroying the social fabric of our country. So we don't want to be like in France, where there's no-go zone. In Germany, it's time to fix that, and we will do it. But also, by doing that, it's under the jurisdiction of the federal government. The new federal government, after the next election, can decide to do that moratorium for a couple of years. When everything will be fixed, we will go back to our immigration policy in the past that was a very success immigration policy. Now, it's a big mess.
And would that moratorium fix everything? I mean, you mentioned about 500,000 illegal migrants, deporting those, but if 1 million people have been coming in a year, how easy is it to turn back the clock on that?
It won't be easy. You're absolutely right about that. It won't be easy because the federal government lost the track of a lot of these people. And so maybe some of them will have a family in Canada, and I don't know. But, there's a lot of civil servants who are working right now to have that mass immigration. And so what we must do, we must reorient their job and working to find these illegals in our country and to be able to deport them. But it won't be easy. I agree with you. We must send the message right now about that to immigrants. If you don't have any work permits in Canada, you must go back to your country. If you're coming here to study in Canada, after your diploma, you must go back to your country of origin. And we must do everything to find these people. That won't be easy. I agree with you. But that's why we have all these civil servants who were there to open our borders and welcoming all these foreigners in our country. Now their job must be to find these illegals, and we must deport them. Actually, I don't know if, and like I said in the beginning, we don't know the real number. Is it 500,000 of them today that are illegals? Is it 25,000? We don't know. We need to put resources to find that and to be able to find these people after it.
And is this the main difference then between you and the Conservative Party in Canada? I mean, I know we're used to this dynamic here in the UK where we've had a conservative government for the last decade that has talked very strong about migration, all the while letting in huge numbers of migrants. I mean, is that kind of the same with the Conservative Party there? And is there more to your disagreement than migration?
Well, the big one is migration, and because the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, Pierre Poilievre, right now, he is pandering. I called him pandering Pierre. He is pandering to all these ethnic communities because, like I said, they're living in ghettos, and so if you have a huge percentage in a riding of a population from India. So he tried to please them, and they want to be able to have their huge family back in Canada with them. So reunification of family is part of his policy. And Poilievre is every weekend, a little bit like Trudeau did when he was in India. He has a new costume every weekend to pander to these ethnic communities. So Poilievre and Trudeau, the Conservative and the Liberals, on immigration, they're the same. They're for mass immigration. And, immigration is not only a challenge in Canada, it's a challenge in US, in UK, in France, in Europe, in Germany. And, that's, I think that is why, populist party like me are growing in different Western countries, because we are speaking about that. And the population is fed up. Actually, they did a survey in Canada, and more than 60% of the population were saying, we must end mass immigration, and including immigrants. You have immigrants who came here 25 years ago. It was very difficult to be a Canadian. They had to speak English or French. They had to have a job. It was difficult. And now they're saying that, it's a mass migration. Everybody can come to our country. So the population is on our side. And actually, these establishment and elite politicians are not listening to the population because they want to buy votes and being sure to have more seats by pandering to these ethnic communities in different ridings to be able to be elected and have being in government. So by doing that, they're not working for Canadians, and it is immoral for a leader of a political party to put first migrants and illegal immigrants and have tried to please them instead of working for Canadian citizens. And Poilievre is not doing that. Trudeau is not doing that. We have the NDP also in Canada, and they're not doing that. So for us, I think that immigration will be a big issue at the next election, because starting with immigration, you have all these other social problems. And I will speak about that. But that's not our only policy. Our political party will focus on 4 or 5 policies. We have about 21 policies on our website. People can go and read it at peoplespartyofcanada.ca. They click on platform, and all our policies are there. So we are a little bit a different political party, because we're doing politics by conviction and ideas, and we don't have a new platform at every election based on survey and polling. We don't do survey and polling. We think and we believe that the Canadian population has been manipulated by the leftist media, like during the COVID hysteria, and the leftist politicians. So we have strong conservative populist policies, and we are speaking about it, popular or not. When I started to speak about immigration in 2019, in English Canada, they were saying that I was a racist because I just wanted at that time to have fewer immigrants. And now, it's all in the mainstream media. The mainstream media now is questioning the immigration policy. That will be very difficult for them to say that I'm a racist at the next election. We were right in 2019, and we are, even as a political party, more right today. So that's the People's Party, and immigration will be part of our platform, plus all the woke ideology. We won't play that game. And all that climate change. Poilievre is like the Liberals on climate change. He will end and axe the carbon tax. that Trudeau put forward in Canada, but it will put more regulations and other taxes to fight climate change and to achieve the targets of the Paris Accord. So we will withdraw from the Paris Accord. We won't impose any tax, any regulations. We believe that the climate is always changing and will always change, and there's no emergency there. So that's we have very strong different policies if you compare that with the Liberals and the Conservative.
So this, you alluded to this even at the beginning. This is a global issue. We talked a little bit about Nigel Farage, Conservatives in name only. You talk to anyone from the United States about politics, they'll talk about rhinos, Republicans in name only. Like, this is a really common issue where you look at the polls, most want a stop to migration in Canada. I think you look in the UK, and at every single election, every political party has put in their manifesto, we're going to reduce migration. And they've always gone back on it. But again, not just in migration, all these other ways, you have conservative parties that when they get into power turn out to be much less than conservative, while you have liberal parties like Justin Trudeau that work hard to appear fairly mainstream while actually being quite radical. What's behind this global dynamic? Why are we let down by conservative parties, by right-wing parties all around the world?
Yeah, the conservative parties, in Canada and maybe in UK, they're afraid of the elites. They're afraid of the mainstream media, and they don't want to promote an ideas that may not be that popular. When I started to speak about immigration, that was not a huge problem, but I wanted to have that discussion 6 years ago because I knew if we open our doors every year with more than 1 million people, that will be a huge problem. But at that time, that was not a big concern with the population, and we didn't have the majority on our side. So these supposed to be our so-called conservative party are doing politics based on survey and polling. But now in Canada, we have the majority on our side on immigration, but they're still afraid. They're still afraid of the mainstream media. They're still afraid to speak about it because their first goal is to have the support of these communities. And they don't want to, they want to please them, and they want to have more seats. Now, with mass immigration, we have a lot of ridings in our country that are, that the result of the election will depend on these new immigrants that are coming to Canada. So they're doing that only to buy votes in different ridings across the country, knowing that it's not popular with the majority of the population. So that's why they're doing everything for us to be canceled in the mainstream media. They don't want us to be able to tackle them and argue with them. But actually, and that's what they did to me at the last election in Canada in 2021. I was supposed to be part of the national debates against these establishment politicians. And they created a new rule for us, and they said, no, Bernier and the People's Party won't participate in the national debate. But I'm supposed to be there at this election this year. So I will ask the question, and I will have real debates with them, and our issues will be, upfront in the mainstream media. But answering your question, I think it's only political. They're doing that to raise money and to have more support in very important ridings for them to be able to win an election. So they're not working for the majority of the population by doing that. They're pandering to these migrants.
And it's, there's compromise on migrants, but also you mentioned in your introduction family values, Canadian values, being important to you, being important to the People's Party. A lot of times you ask, well, what is Canadian values? You'll get told, well, it's multiculturalism, or that diversity, like something like that will often be the official answer. What is your vision of Canadian values and of family values?
You're right about that. When you said that, when you a Canadian value must be, our healthcare system. But our healthcare system is not functioning. We have long waiting lists for surgeries. It's not efficient. And also, yes, establishment politicians are saying, like Trudeau, diversity and multiculturalism and being open to immigration. That's supposed to be Canadian values. But for me, it is not. Canadian values is first, we have a Charter of Rights. We must put our people first, individual freedom. We must be sure that we respect everybody, yes. And, everybody is equal before the law. And that's not the case right now with the woke policies. For example, if you are a Black entrepreneur in Canada, you'll be able to apply for a loan from the federal government. But if you're a white entrepreneur, you won't be able to apply. So that's discrimination, that's racism, and that's not in line with Canadian values where everybody is equal under the law. And family values. Now, they're telling us that the conservatives and the liberals that there's more than two sexes. And they voted for a bill in Canada, the Bill C4, unanimously. All the conservatives and all the liberals, they voted for that bill. The bill, is the bill that it will put parents in prison, in jail, parents in jail if they have a kids that is not so sure about their sex, or they're not feeling good with their bodies. You cannot do everything for your kid to be able to accept their own body. You can go in jail for 5 years. So that bill, it's a bill that is saying okay to the mutilation of children. Conservatives and liberals voted for that. For me, there's only two sex, and for me, a child is never born in a wrong body. And so you must be able to say that in politics, that there's only two sexes. But Poilievre and Trudeau won't say that. They promote the trans ideology, and for me, it's indoctrination of our kids. A young boy cannot be a young girl, and a young girl will never be a young boy. That's the biological reality. But speaking about that in Canada, it's a scandal. You don't have the right. It's not politically correct. But, for me, I prefer to tell the truth than being politically correct. But all that, it's against the family values, parental rights. We must promote that, and we are at the People's Party. So it's a way to destroy our Western civilizations. That's what is happening in our country. That's what is happening in France and maybe also in UK. You know that better than myself.
So you've got a lot, I think, against you. Like you've talked about the mainstream media, what over here we'd kind of call the establishment, both political parties, the major ones at the moment, the Conservatives, the Liberals, going for what 5 years ago, 10 years ago, certainly would have been regarded as incredibly extreme positions on, say, the trans issue. You've got education that is very much kind of against you on those issues, and those instilling very different values. I think one of the recent times I was in Canada, it was during COVID, and all the flags were at half-mast because of this. The indigenous schools and the bodies that turned out to be very incredibly overblown, not true at all, really. And like there's a whole mainstreamization, if I can misuse a word, of this like hating Canadian history. That was statues coming down. Like how do you swim against and overturn that tide?
Yeah, it is a little bit more difficult for us because I'm canceled, like you just said, by the mainstream media. At least we have the social media. I'm very active on social media. And the censorship is there also on social media, a little bit less than 5 years ago. But what is helping us is the fact that we have always only one electoral platform. It's the same one at every election. So what I'm telling you today, I said that 6 years ago, 10 years ago. People can find a video of me saying that 6 years ago. So what is the most important in politics is your credibility as a politician. And by saying the same thing over and over and informing the population, educating the population on these issues, speaking about our strong vision for our country, Canada first, you will win the battle of ideas. The fact that they don't want us in the mainstream media because they know that if they are giving me more visibility, our growth will be faster. But the truth will always prevail, and common sense will prevail. Our time is coming. Like for immigration right now, the majority of Canadians are on our side. That was not the case in 2019 because of all these disinformation. I must use that word, disinformation coming from the mainstream media on immigration. So the time is on our side. We need to be out there to focus and work hard. We will have a full slate of candidates at the next election in every riding in our country. Every Canadian will be able to vote for their values, for the People's Party. But my campaign will be a little bit like the one that Robert F. Kennedy did in US during the presidential electoral campaign. He was also, canceled by the mainstream media, but he did a lot of podcasts and YouTubers. Yes, I saw him on Joe Rogan, but I saw him also on a young podcaster who has only 1,000 viewers. So with social media, it is our main way to communicate our ideas and also being on the ground and speaking with people. But I hope that they won't change the rule and I'll be able to be in the national debates at the next election. So if I'm there against Poilievre and the new leader of the Liberal Party, at least the mainstream media will have to speak about our ideas a couple of days before the debate, during the debate, and a couple of days after the debate. But we will grow like Nigel did. It took him 7 years to be elected, and now he's elected. But at the next election, general election in UK, he will grow a little bit more, and we are going more. The more we grow, the more support we have, the more influential we will be, and that's important to change the way that these other establishment politicians and parties are promoting bad ideas. So the more our ideas would be out there, that will force them to maybe listen a little bit to what we are saying. But I'm pleased that we have a lot of supporters across the country who are like me fighting for our freedoms, and we will fight until we win the battle of ideas.
So, and as what you mentioned, Robert Kennedy, I did want to bring in some of US politics. Of course, Donald Trump has made a lot of waves with his comments on Canada. But stepping back a bit, you had Barack Obama as this massive liberal or left-wing influence in the United States. Justin Trudeau then coming towards the end of his time in office. I mean, how influential has Barack Obama been in what Justin Trudeau has done? Like, are these two left, kind of very far left, really, that have really moved the needle? Are these two administrations kind of, they're separate, they're their own thing, there's a similar zeitgeist, a similar background in culture, or are there any direct connections between that?
We must admit that the relationship with Obama and Trudeau was very good. They were sharing the same radical leftist ideas. That's my point of view. But Trudeau, not only with Obama, but also with the World Economic Forum, with the World Health Organization, Trudeau was proud to promote these socialist policies in our country, in Canada, during the COVID hysteria with lockdowns and vaccines passport, actually also with the climate change and migration compact. So Trudeau was in line with the globalist, and he was importing all these bad ideas in our politics, in our legislations in Canada. So the fact that Trudeau is not there anymore, that's a good news. But the new leader of the Liberal Party they're globalists. You have Mark Carney that you must know. He was governor of the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England and in charge of the UN project to impose measures on big businesses to fight climate change and being, having DEI policies and all that. So maybe Carney will be the new leader of the Liberal Party, but Carney is the globalist in chief in Canada. So for the UN, so Trudeau was the impact of Trudeau in our policy, in our politics in Canada is very bad. I believe that he will be judged by historians as one of the worst, if not the worst, prime minister in the history of our country. And he was following Barack Obama on some policy. He was following the UN. He was following the World Economic Forum. So all these organizations were present in our country. So that's why our position on that, we will withdraw from we won't participate in the World Economic Forum. We will actually withdraw from the Paris Accord, like I said. We won't finance the UN only if they are doing things and policies that are in line with our values. All these organizations and politicians did influence Justin Trudeau, but also personally, he is a little bit a socialist, not a little bit, he is a socialist like his father was also. So it's not a surprise what Trudeau did. All these policies, and he was a good salesperson of all these globalist policies to Canadians.
I know you've got to go in a few minutes, so I think you've brought up a lot of really interesting points. I think there's a lot of different things I'd still like to ask you about some of those, but maybe as a last question. So you win the election, you're in office. You've talked about turning around migration, but in terms of some of these other issues, we talked about, say, the tide in institutions and education, and how do you turn that around, especially as, say, a small party with a light touch, or a small government? Sorry, you want small government, limited government, but there's big changes that need to happen in media, in education. Like, how does a small government make that happen? Because obviously, if you start dictating to the media what they can and can't say, you're now becoming the problem that you want to stop. So if you win, how do you turn Canada around?
Well, I believe in free press, and what we will do, we will stop giving money to these mainstream media, the big newspapers and TV stations and CBC and Radio-Canada. We want them to be independent. Now they are not. They are the propaganda arms of the government. So defund the CBC and cutting all funding to mainstream media first. Second, also bringing all that money back to Canada that we are giving to foreign aid. We can save $10 billion there by cutting foreign aids, cutting the subsidies in big businesses. That's another $10 billion. So what I'm telling you, we will be able to balance the budget in 1 year doing all that and having a real small government that won't interfere in provincial jurisdictions and interfere in our day-to-day life. So, and, cutting the funding to all these third-party organizations who are promoting DEI policies and promoting wokeism. The federal government is giving a lot of money to these organizations, and they're traveling across the country and promoting that ideology in school. So we will cut the funding. That will help. And you must know that also education is under the control of our provincial governments. I won't interfere there. But we will cut the funding that the federal government is giving to these organizations who are not promoting Canadian values. So immigration, I said it, moratorium. Actually, also, we will repeal all these legislations that Trudeau did pass on censorship on social media. So we will be able to do all these changes. But the most important, we will have the mandate and the credibility and the authority to do these changes, because that's part of our party since the creation and the foundation of this party in 2018. It's always the same policies that we are putting forward. And now, nobody will be able to tell us, you don't have a mandate to do that. That's through radical. No. When we'll be in government, I don't know when. It can be in a year or 5 years, or I don't know. But we will have the authority to impose and implement our platform.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Bernier. You mentioned your website, I think, earlier on. Did you want to just give that to our listeners again, in case they want to look up more about you, your party?
Yeah, they can follow me on Twitter, on X, Maxime Bernier. They can follow also me on different social media. But if they want to know more about the People's Party of Canada, they can go on our website. Everything is there. peoplespartyofcanada.ca. They can read our platform. That's there. And if they like what we are promoting, I hope that they will help us to have more coverage and visibility on social media. And I want to thank you for that, because I know that a lot of Canadians are watching your show. So thank you for giving me that opportunity to be with you.
And thank you so much for coming on. And we'll be watching the news and the election in Canada this year with great interest.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Great. Thank you. Well, that was our interview. And I think it helps illustrate the scale of the transformation required in Canada. And we talked a bit about what it will take to turn things back or to fix some of these problems. I think it's becoming clear to more and more people that we need a kind of worldwide revolution. We're airing this interview in the week where Donald Trump has been inaugurated in the United States and launched a kind of mini revolution himself with all of his 100 or so executive orders just on day one. And I think, as you probably saw with some of my line of questioning, where I perhaps disagree a bit with Mr. Bernier is on the scale of that problem and the revolution required to fix it. I think a leader does need to be optimistic and believe that problems are solvable. But as you saw from that discussion, it's going to take a lot to turn things around. You need to fix media, you need to fix journalism, you need to fix immigration, you need to fix a whole range of problems in wider society. You need to reverse a moral decline. You need a change of beliefs and priorities for Canada as a whole. And so my takeaway is really that it will take a miracle to turn things around. Yes, there are things that we can do to improve the situation. You see that in the United States with Donald Trump, where, sure, you may not agree with every single thing that he's done, but there are a lot of proactive, positive steps that a strong leader can take if he's in power to reverse some of the damage from the radical left. And I think you see some of that with Mr. Bernier as well, that you put in a right-wing leader with a backbone, and there are definitely things that he can improve. But if you're talking about turning all of this around, the scale of that challenge requires a miracle. And that is why we do what we do on Trumpet World. We show that all world events are happening as part of a plan of a loving God, but also that we need him, that we cannot solve our own problems. And I'll conclude just by mentioning our free book, The United States and Britain in Prophecy. This is a great introduction to God's plan for the United States, for Britain, but really, well, more specifically, Canada or Australia. An earlier version of that book included the British Commonwealth in the title. But it's not just about those nations. It is about what God is doing for the world through those nations. It is about God's very practical, real plan for mankind. And so that book is a blueprint to God's plan to turn things around. So if you can get that book on our website. If you're new to viewing us today, we have a whole range of free material that we have on our website, thetrumpet.com, that you can read online, but also that you can order and get a print copy for free. There's no shipping charges. There's no follow-up. There's none of that. We just want to get this material out to the largest audience possible. So if you go to our website, thetrumpet.com, click on the literature tab, you should be able to find your way to the United States and Britain in Prophecy there. We'll put a link to it down in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you once again to Maxime Bernier. It was great to have him on the show. Thank you to George Haddad for engineering and production. We have our live weekend review show that goes out at 2:30 Greenwich Mean Time, 8:30 Central Standard Time in the United States. So we'll be back as usual on Friday. And until then, keep watching your world.